You're listening to the Confident Choice Podcast with me, Dr. Roberto Garcia, a double board certified facial plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Honest conversations and expert advice about the decisions that make you feel your best. Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, April 3rd, and we are filming our next episode, episode 5 of The Natural Look, and how do we get to that appearance, which it's interesting because I came into this business, I would say, in the right time when the way that plastic surgery was transforming was really like mountainous. It was this huge transformation that we were going through, right? And I think that plastic surgery has had 2 or 3 major transformations in its birth, so to speak, in its genesis. And you know, the idea of what plastic surgery is, originally it was described in, I don't know, 1200 BC by an Indian surgeon named Susrutu. Don't ask me how I remember that. But he used to actually replant people's noses from their arm because of penalties for stealing or adultery, where they would have their noses cut off. So the first major reconstructive work considered under the plastic surgery realm was nasal reconstruction. So you had these patients walking around with their arms stuck up to their face for 6 weeks while integration of tissue was happening. And that's how it started. And so the first big guys in plastic surgery were all in the nasal world, right? That was the big thing. And the term plastic means to mold, right? It's a Greek word, and it doesn't mean. For the longest time, you know, patients would tell me, "Well, I don't want anything plastic in me, Dr. Garcia." I said, "Well, there's nothing plastic. It's a molding," and there was a major misconception as to how that molding should be done, and so aesthetic surgery of the face really didn't gain popularity until the 20th century. And then all of a sudden it became this almost this elitist thing where I need to prove to my friends that I've had plastic surgery, which means I have wealth and opulence, right? And so it became a surgery of obviousness. And we found that originally might have had virtue, but then with time it became so extravagant and so over the top that things had to change. And so where we really found the big shift in plastic surgery and the appearance and the overall search for the natural look, really at the around 25, maybe 30 years ago. And as I was going through my training, I was seeing that developing, right? I was seeing the transition from that plastic, overdrawn, unnaturally appearing face to that more subtle, wow, you look really good. I would never guess that you had something done, but something has been done and I can't figure it out, right? And so if you were to look at movie stars or newscasters back in the 80s and 90s and compare them to now, there's people on television, and I'm subject to this all the time, that I'll see a newscaster and I have to look up how old they are, and I say, there's no way this person's 72 years old, because they've had procedures done appropriately. And if you were to think about 2 major people in Hollywood that subscribe to that, and I think we're launch pads for the appropriateness of our field, was Sophia Loren and Jane Fonda. Those two individuals did what I think is the critical way of managing the aging process of the face. And that's that they would do little things along the way in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. They do little tweaks and never try to hit a home run, but they were just hitting singles and just tweaking things and changing things. And so what ends up happening is you fast forward to a 75, 80-year-old Jane Fonda. I mean, she looks good, right? Mm-hmm. Incredibly good. And I have always kind of had that in my mind as to how can I implement that philosophy with my patients. And so the idea of the natural look is really centered upon never having any procedure draw attention onto itself, right? And everybody has some kind of disfigurement. Sometimes you are born with a disfigurement. Sometimes you have large ears, small chin, disfigured nose. The purpose of plastic surgery, quote unquote, is to balance those disfigured areas with the remainder of the face so they no longer stand out, right? And so what I do when I see a patient is I'll find what's their beauty point, right? What is it that really sells their face? And let's say somebody who has a large nose. Well, that nose is now taking attention off the eyes. So what I need to do is take the attention off of the nose by altering it some way or another to where now I see the eyes and the eyes only, and I no longer notice the nose. So Leonardo da Vinci, years ago, I say years, centuries ago, talked about facial aesthetics, and you guys may have heard of something called the Vitruvian Man, right? It's that guy whose arms are stretched out, and it shows the perfect circle of a human with his arms out at a certain angle and his legs out at a certain angle. And so within that, and there's several books that I have of his sketches, of his early sketches. And he talks about facial aesthetics and facial thirds, and so rather horizontal thirds and vertical fifths of the face. So everything needs to fall within these parameters in order to create a natural appearance. And so when things fall outside of those parameters, it becomes an obvious feature that's now detracting beauty, the natural beauty. And so what our goal is an understanding, okay, how did this face age? What happened in the last 10 to 15 years? What's the delta of aging? And I look at somebody who comes in to see me and I'll say, okay, the brows have descended in a certain manner. The jawline has changed in a certain manner. The neck has changed in a certain manner. If I try to rediscover what's called the vectors of aging or the directionality of aging, then I'm going to create an unnatural plastic look. So I don't want to do that. I want to discover what direction did the face age in, and then I want to lift counter and opposite to those. So in essence, we're putting things back where they used to be. And that is how you correct the delta of aging. You only elicit a change in those things that have transpired over the course of the last 10 years, right? And so the goal that, kind of the struggle that most plastic surgeons have is in that knowing when to say when. And I think I've spoken to this a few other podcasts in the past, and it's that idea of, okay, you don't need 6, 7 things. You can correct 1 or 2 things that now reestablish beauty without you ever knowing that that was done. And so that's kind of the concept behind the natural look, is in tweaking something that's negative so that something that's existing, that's positive, now jumps out. And so the way that we do that, is, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of how I look at anatomy and whatnot. I think that's a conversation for another day. And I think we have some YouTube videos out there as to how the face ages. Amy, I'm pretty sure we do back from the day. But what we're trying to say is if you start getting involved earlier on in life and you find that sweet spot of aging, which is generally mid 40s to mid 60s, the fact is you can do little things and you can have larger results long term. So I want to talk a little bit about, there's a lot of conversation about facial balancing and what does that mean? And I'm going to talk about facial balancing with regards to the aging face. And you have to understand that the face, particularly on a woman, okay, so let's just use a woman as the gender example we're going to discuss. The woman goes through significant aging patterns in her 30s and 40s, okay? And the human woman is the only species who is more attractive than the male version. In every other species, the male is a more attractive, vibrant, more attention-seeking animal. Look at the lion. Look at a cardinal, right? The male is the red cardinal. And so you look at a peacock, right? Look at a turkey, right? They're always bigger, and that's to protect the female, right? They draw attention of the predator. Well, humans don't have that, and so the changes that a woman starts seeing in her 30s, and it's really decade driven. In her 30s, a woman starts noticing collagen loss. That's the big one, and usually it's about a percentage every year, thereabouts. And the changes that she starts seeing is at the level of the skin. The skin starts getting thinner, crepier. As a result of that, one starts noticing more discolorations, friability to the skin. And by the time you hit your 40s or your fifth decade, one has lost close to 10% of their collagen. Well, the collagen loss isn't solely occurring on the superficial envelope. It's also occurring everywhere in the body, and it's occurring in the musculature of the face. And there's muscles of the face that are intimately involved with collagen and fatty layers that hold up the lower face and the brow. And when you start losing collagen in those areas, things begin to descend. Now, the reason that a brow descends differently than a mid-face as compared to a neck is all because there's retention ligaments that dictate where that aging process or that directionality goes, okay? But they are all undergoing the same problem, which is due to collagen loss. Then a woman gets into her 40s and she enters into her perimenopausal years, okay? Now, guys, understand the spirit in which I'm saying this. I'm not trying to be, I'm not being insulting to anybody. But the way God has designed the woman, when a woman no longer is needed to reproduce, her face makes drastic changes for the negative. I know you guys are laughing at me, but these are facts, okay? I got the whole studio here laughing at me. Why is that? When a woman is youthful, she has a rounder face, right? More volume in her face. Just compare photos of yourself to when you were in your 20s. She has smooth, perfect skin, not needing any kind of makeup or anything to cover up irregularities, right? And so as the woman enters into the menopausal years, estrogen descending and dropping as a result of that. And so the fat in the face, or rather the face, begins to deflate. And so now you've combined collagen loss with fat loss. And that is what spearheads the gravitational changes. So establishing facial balance is in correcting those three things. Re, Reinstituting collagen growth back into the skin, replacing volume back into areas that are hollowed. And when you look at what happens with volume loss of the face, it's really simple. Look at an 80-year-old person, and then if you can ever find a picture of her in her 30s, you are going to see that that 80-year-old face is skeletonized. The purpose of fat in the face is to round out the edges of the skeleton so that it looks more round, cherubistic, and youthful. As that face ages and fat is drawn from the face, and most times it's redistributed to truncal parts of the body in order to protect vital organs for the second half of life, you then have this gauntness that develops in the face. And that really was what spearheaded the Contoura structural fat grafting technique back in the early 2000s that we did. And it was about replenishing fat, replanting fat back into the face so we could create that more rounded, almost a heart-shaped face. And so when you combine the volume loss correction, or revolumization of the face, I should say, with collagen correction, and then you address the effects of gravity, you have now reestablished facial balance. Now the face simply looks like it's still aged, but it didn't age like it should have aged. And the best indicator is when my patients go to a class reunion. I'm serious. And they come back and they say, you have no idea how many old people I saw. And the reason is that everybody's been aging, but what this person did was they slowed it down. And if you subscribe to that concept that we were talking about earlier, that timeless elegance, that timeless aging, you can really almost have a consistently improved look for your decade of life. I'm not saying that you're going to be 30 forever, okay? We're not freezing time. That's impossible. But what you can do is always look younger than you should look at that age. And when you combine that with a proper lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, then the results of that can be pretty impactful. And so we are big proponents of, in our industry, in our specialty as a whole, is really moving towards this facial balancing world rather than the shock and awe that I was talking about at the outset of the podcast. You know, you don't want that, oh my gosh, what did she have done? You want something's different. Did you change your hair? And so that's absolutely what we're after. And I think that's better seen when you're looking at somebody's before and after results, and when you're talking to that surgeon, and you can almost see it in their evaluation of you, that they're more interested not in the procedure, but they're more interested in the outcome. You know, I'm not interested in doing a facelift on somebody. I'm interested on what's the result of that facelift going to give me? Is it going to put this face back where I envision it having been 10 years ago, 15 years ago? That's how you properly address the aging face. So I think we're going to close off what I think has been a fantastic episode, and thank you guys again for listening and taking the time. And I hope that some of the things that I talk about resonate, and you can feel a little bit more empowered and feel like you have a little bit more information and are able to make a better decision. Ultimately, that's what we really care about. And so, you guys all know that I've been closing every podcast with something that my dad taught me. And again, every week it seems like I come up with a new lesson that pops into my head. And so I write it down, and I think about it, and I say, you know what, this might be a good one to share. And, my father emigrated from Cuba. I don't know if I've talked about this before. Yeah, he immigrated from Cuba in 1960. and he came here after having been put on a firing squad and almost killed in Cuba. And he was in fact, I have an article in the office here somewhere about his life. But anyway, and he smuggled himself out of Cuba onto a plane, and he came here with $7 tucked into the toe of his shoe. Okay, and he was a self-made man. Never asked anybody for help. He came here with nothing. He slowly built his ability to pay for school. He went to school on his own. He paid for his own school, um, and he always worked to pay things back, right? And even though he, for all intents and purposes, he came here when he was 19. He was a kid by himself. But so many people along the way helped him that he always said really didn't have to help me. But for whatever reason, God put them in my path and they directed me, from a guy working at a burger place in Miami to a taxi driver to a little old lady in Douglas, Georgia who took him in and taught him English. The amount of doors that were open to him by complete strangers, he would have talked about that topic for days on end. And so he always wanted us to appreciate those that came before him, right? And the struggles, the result of the fact that you are here is a result of just a plethora of people that went through much harder times than you did, paving the path for you. And he always talked about wanting his kids to stand on his shoulders and be better than him. And I don't know if that's possible. He was a great man. But the truth is that I think we live in a society now, we live in a world where we're so critical of it, and we're so critical of those that think differently than us, that maybe we should stop and just think about all those that came before us and the world that they paved for us, and understand that it could be a lot worse than what it really is. The United States is not perfect, but it's probably the least screwed up in the world, and no place is perfect. And my dad left a very corrupt place that was trying to kill him for this country, and he was always very appreciative of what this country gave him, and he was always very appreciative of all the people that took him in when they didn't have to. And so I try to pass that forward, and I try to help as many people as I can along my path, that maybe one day they'll pass it on, you know? And the struggle that those that came before you, it's always a lot harder than yours, you know? And the goal of being a parent is that your children have less of a struggle than you did, you know? And unfortunately, that comes with a little bit of a caveat, that if you take away all of the struggles of your children, then you cripple them, and you have to be careful with that. And so my father he really established a good balance of not having us go through the ills of what he went through. Of course, he wouldn't want us to go through a firing squad or all the things that he had to go through to get to this country, but he also made us appreciate everything that, all the doors that had been opened for us, you know. And so I know it's a little bit of a more serious note, but I think it was something that needed to be talked about, especially in today's climate of all the craziness out there. And then maybe we should just stop and be thankful for what we do have, instead of being critical of the things that we do not have, you know. And it can always be worse. And remember that wherever we are placed, we are there on purpose. Somebody or something put us there on purpose, and our job is to make the very best of that situation while we are in it. So thank you again, And as always, remember,